Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for our speaker series lecture. I want to remind all students who are signing in for attendance to please visit today's Slido code. So if you go to sli.do, you can put in this hashtag. That allows you to put in your A number and your name for attendance, as well as ask questions for our Q&A following this lecture. My name is Danielle Mezzanato, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. Real quickly, I want to go over our lineup that we have for this fall. Today, we're going to be talking with Mia Lehrer from Studio MLA. And then in October, we'll be visiting with Shannon Ellsworth and Dorothy and Jean Dyer. Then to wrap up our series this fall, in November, we'll be speaking with Carolyn Lavoie, Stephen Spears, and Rebecca Leonard. I'd like to introduce Todd Johnson, who's played an integral role in the speaker series, not just this year, but for the past several years, getting it up to a new standard, setting the bar higher each semester. Todd, thank you for all of your continued support with the series. And I'm gonna pass it over to you to introduce Mia.
Thanks, Danielle. Well, it's really a pleasure, since you mentioned upping the ante with speaker series, it's really a pleasure to welcome Mia Lehrer to our Utah State University LAEP speaker series. And we've been trying to get Mia in the series for a couple of years. We bumped into Rosh Hashanah, I think, a couple of years ago, but we're really happy to have her and her colleague Kush here today. She'll introduce Kush. I want to say a few things about Mia first. You all can go to the internet and get a more elaborate description of her entire career, but she is a fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects, which means she's given extraordinary service to the profession and developed a presence in the practice that's national, if not international. She is founder and partner of Mia Lehrer and Associates, which is no small feat given the significance of their work. She received her Bachelor's of Arts degree from Tufts University and her Master's of Landscape Architecture degree from Harvard University, so she obviously likes Boston. Mia rose to principal and partner status with Pete Walker and Bill Johnson, two icons of the profession. So amazing exposure to the most significant work of the second half of the 20th century. Pretty amazing experience. And then her ensuing development of her own practice. She served on numerous boards and served numerous mayoral campaigns, including prominently and recently a term on the United States Commission of Fine Art, which is an amazing experience, I'm sure. I would say that there's a word that's used by Bostonites called, that's wicked good, that's wicked good. Mia works on wicked good problems, including initial and ongoing work on the Los Angeles River, which is a seminal project for sure, and that work was initially done in collaboration with Mark Johnson, who's an alum of the program and a friend of Utah State. She is a native of El Salvador and I think a self-proclaimed Latina who packs a punch. The packs the punch part would be my editorial addition to that. I first met Mia as a co-juror for the National ASLA Awards program in Washington, D.C. in the early 2000s. I found her to be thoughtful, strong, and without professional pretense or veneer. We immediately talked about the value of design and the values that are manifest in the profession. If the categories of asking questions are what, how, and why, Mia is about the why. Her firm has established a unique culture around answering the world's most challenging questions with emphasis on why. Mia, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I am excited to be here. Actually, We rebranded our firm because I have such an incredible team. So we did that sort of soul searching with a coach, and we are Studio MLA, just so you know. So it could be Metropolitan Landscape Architecture, it could be any number of things. But today I have with me here to sort of discuss and banter around one of our major projects of the last 10 years, Hollywood Park. He's a associate principal and led this project over the last 12 years. He is originally from Mumbai, and has gotten a lot of white hair out of this project, is all I would say. Graduate of Ohio State. How come I'm not being able to advance in order to keep time? Okay, so I'm delighted that Christina Hill already spoke to you. And, you know, I do want to sort of, talk about, as we enter the fall, the imperative for students and people to find their own voice, act now, and continue to advocate for landscape architecture. I've been told that I have a reputation for being a troublemaker, but I prefer to think myself as an apologetic advocate for doing what is right. Simply put, I'm passionate about making cities healthier places to live, environmentally, socially, aesthetically, and culturally. Passionate about undoing some of the damage we've done to our natural systems and reintegrating nature into our cities. For the nature part, I come from a family that has advocacy deeply programmed into our DNA. Part of that probably has something to do with my family's strong embrace of Jewish values, especially the concept of tikkun olam, a Jewish concept defined by acts of kindness performed to repair the world. It is often used when discussing issues of social policy, ensuring a safeguard to those who may be at a disadvantage, to repair the earth. My family originated in Germany, but fled during the war. Some went to Brazil, some to Israel, and some to El Salvador, like my parents did. And many don't know this, but they initially tried their luck in California's gold rush before moving to El Salvador. So I think California was also partly in my DNA. There's actually a small train station in Northern California called Gold Tree, which is where my relatives. El Salvador was a beautiful, lush, tropical paradise. Parrots, hummingbirds, orchids, and an extreme topographic and geologic forms with active volcanoes that loomed over our house in the city of San Salvador. With amazing natural ecosystems, mangroves, rainforests. Where one of my great aunts, Helen Struss, was one of the founders of the Trust for Public Land. My mother started a microloan bank for women entrepreneurs, and my father was passionate environmentalist. He was obsessive about conserving natural resources and founded a nonprofit called Salva Natura, which is akin to the Salvadorian TPL. He was a Renaissance man, and he ran a wholesale hardware store, sort of a Home Depot, although probably shouldn't mention Home Depot right now. He founded a community development bank, and eventually he was an ambassador later in his life, representing this little country, which he adored and gave him so much and saved him from the Holocaust. After doing an internship during my gap year between high school and college, I did an internship with the World Bank where I studied the coastal zone in El Salvador. And basically, there was a group of professionals in El Salvador doing the coastal zone, and I was an intern. as I said. I learned about planning and the planning work that seemed particularly interesting and relevant to my life then. I was accepted to Tufts University and eventually started really learning so much more about the profession. You know, small little countries with small little cities, nobody, you know, there was no real organized planning and there were very few parks. You were just out in nature. It's either you were in your, you know, in your home in the city, or you were out in nature at varying levels. So I lapped up my education and really enjoyed learning from many of my professors at Tufts. And one of them being Herman Field, who had written quite a few articles with Kevin Lynch. And eventually I got to know Kevin Lynch. I got to know Carl Steinitz, who was then a professor at Harvard, and got to know landscape architecture by seeing a exhibit at the GSD, where one of the courses that I was taking, you could go there, you had to go to the lecture series there on the campus. And I realized, wow, what is this? This is really incredible. And so these were the competition drawings of Olmsted and Bow for, of course, Central Park. Many years later, because you make things up in your head, like, because they were very long drawings in the lobby at the GSD is pretty large, and there were about 15 of these drawings. And years later, I thought maybe I made that up. I mean, I know they were amazing, and I know that they inspired me to study landscape architecture, but did they exist? And so the head librarian said, do you want to see those drawings? You just said in the lecture that you don't know they exist. And she went down there, and they were as beautiful as I remembered, and they were as layered as, you know, there were layers and layers of plants and water and sort of infrastructure, and it was wonderful. And then, you know, fast forward, you know, I had this crazy education where Peter Walker was talking about the beauty and the aesthetics and minimalism. And then Ian McCart, which was exploding our heads, talking about, you know, a new way of thinking about working with the earth. And as we thought of growth, how we needed to think about the layers that we were impacting. And although Pete and Ian, or Pete and Jack Dangermore didn't realize that it created, as a student, a lot of conflicts. Like, wow, am I supposed to want to do a beautiful garden like Pete does? Or am I supposed to care about the world? You know, it's like, what do I do? So that's kind of a sort of in a nutshell, sort of eventually I met my husband at the GSD and moved to California because he was from Los Angeles. And I want to say that I think the team that gets attracted to our firm have sense and urgency to act now, even more so now over the last 20 years. And that we know that leadership leads to vision, and policy leads to funding, and funding leads to planning, and design empowers and materializes. Your elected officials, your mayors and governors become your best friends when they can, you know, open a park, that's for sure. So with that, it's like, so this is, you know, we've done projects of many different scales, and I'm going to be taking you through some of our projects, and we're, you know, and then ending up in a conversation, as I said, about the work we've been doing over the last 12 years in Hollywood Park. So this is our studio. We actually put our, I would say, put our money where our design was, and we're like 50 feet from the river here in a warehouse with an amazing team. And it's a sort of a space within a space. Next. We hold a lot of sort of get-togethers and functions, and I have a son who's who actually does art installations, and we ended up with some form of a space vehicle for a year. It's a long story, but it was fun to have around. And then the city of Los Angeles had decided that oak trees were too hard to maintain, even though they're native to Los Angeles. So I mentioned it to one of the contractors we work with, and he said, well, when am I bringing it in? And this tree has its own story, because we obviously got a big tree sort of delivered to us, and it's made quite a sort of a difference in our life as a firm, just being outside, but also every year we're able to tell the head of Recreation and Parks that thanks to us, we can plant oak trees now in the city. The other thing we did as part of this project was really speak about our values by having a place where people can convene. And this happened to be a project we were working on. And so we had a stakeholder workshop for the LA County Sustainability Plan that we worked on with Bureau Happold. And in particular, this one was about focus on parks and open space. And then this was International Women's Day, and the boys had to, you know, humor us. And so we had a party next. And funnily enough, people are starting to call. So the Sierra Club, you know, loves to tout being here, and sort of trying to sort of celebrate the fact that the river and the river communities are alive. Nice. I've also founded a couple of nonprofits that are, you know, out and about and independent, but we help make some young groups come together to do the work that they really are passionate about. And so just to frame, so I don't have to go back to resilience, you know, can be defined as the capacity for a system to survive, adapt, and flourish in the face of turbulent change. Adaptation refers to the efforts by society or ecosystems to prepare for and adjust to future climate change. These adjustments can be protective or opportunistic. And then one that was really very, you know, very sort of present at the time that we were in school was urban ecology. Urban landscape design to shelve built and natural systems, allowing humans and nature to exist in productive harmony. And that's a new reality for nature in the city related to climate change and urbanization. So not thinking that we can go back to, you know, completely go back to what nature was, but thinking about how to recalibrate and think as a profession multidisciplinarily to really make change, and that we are in the intersection of art, design, and the earth and social sciences to plan and design public land and private landscapes. So Los Angeles, you know, it's a pretty amazing sort of place to work. I love the quote by Frank Lloyd Wright, tip the world over on the side and everything loose will end in Los Angeles. Like the rest of America, California is uninformed, innovative, ahistorical, hedonistic, acquisitive, and energetic, only more so. And compared, of course, to many other big cities in the world, New York, Mexico City, city of Sao Paulo, we're, you know, the population, we're just more dispersed. And so the problems are quite different. And I always love Rainer Banham's sort of analysis of who we are, the freeways, the beach, the flatlands, and the foothills. There was one thing he forgot, and that was the blue sky. And I'd had to look at his documentaries numerous times to realize that. But that is what made me so excited to be in California after living with eight years of sort of muggy, sort of snow or muggy weather in the East Coast. And it's 88 cities, thousands of neighborhoods, millions of individual experiences. And a series of villages is what we call it, because, you know, there's just people from all over the world, and just very sort of a really interesting pastiche. And, you know, I think at this point, many of you that are studying now would appreciate the fact that we are going from monoculture to polyculture and multi-purpose infrastructure, but it took, you know, 15 years of professionals and academics and scientists in the LA area to start pushing that agenda, and you know, helping people understand that water, energy, and lands can start being interconnected, and that the solutions can be multi-beneficial. So I'll be talking about, you know, basically the networks and the fabric and the engines of innovation. Well, you know, we've had a drought, and unfortunately, though, you know, with climate change, we had a drought. It was terrible. Everybody's starting to get used to sort of saving water, and oops, you know, and then oops, there was all of a sudden a little bit more rain for 2 years. Even though the governor had already declared that the drought was over. And then we ended up with another set of issues, which is, of course, fires. And in the fragile infrastructure in disasters, you know, we're, you know, all the things we address: earthquakes, drought, fire, and flood, and how we move water from the northern part of the state to the southern part of the state, and how we take water from Colorado, and all those are factors. And we are the largest producer of fruits and vegetables across the country. And this is what the aqueduct looks like, moving 373 miles and using actually 19% of the electricity used by the state is used for moving the water around. And by the way, I just became a commissioner for the Department of Water and Power this week. Southern California, freeways and rivers, of course, one would have hoped that the rivers would have gotten more of a presence from a sort of morphological sort of city fabric perspective, but no, they were kind of sort of abandoned in many ways, and the freeways took over. So, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail, but those are all the kinds of things that, of course, we're dealing with. So when you're talking about a channelized river, it's 52 miles of river, and it collects the water from the city and takes it right down to the ocean. This is what this farmland used to look like in the turn of the century. And oops, there were some major basically floods, and California had become sort of a state with a lot of industry and jobs, and concrete had just been sort of uncovered or sort of perfected. And here we are with the river right around the site that I'm going to show you momentarily. So it's sort of I'm not going to go through this because we do have a lot to share, but you know, there's been the flooding and the channelization, and I love the image on the top in the middle of the 1935 Army Corps of Engineers. And they have a lab in the East Coast right outside Washington, D.C., where they were actually doing mock-ups out of plywood of what would happen if, you know, if the Arroyo Seco and the LA River were channelized, what would happen and how that would perform. Of course, there's a new life to the river. Had to be declared navigable. So in the 2000s, after the master plan, which the master plan of 2007 really helped to do, the leadership started advocating in Washington, D.C. for the river to become navigable, because everybody was considering it just basically a concrete, channel. And navigable meant that not only could you go from the top to the bottom and on water, but also that there was enough ecosystem in the channel to really be able to use. And are we going to be able to do this? And, you know, and that's the site that they did the mock-up of. And that's the governor that set the tone for the river to be considered navigable eventually, but being signed by President Obama. I always wondered when I saw this, what they did with the oil. You'll see momentarily. Okay, here we go. And the fire, and you always wonder what happened with all the oil that went into the ocean and the fire, you know, the havoc that it caused. So this is the river. This is actually the river within, you know, 500 feet of us here. And of course, there are at least 20 miles of river that look like this because the water table was so high that the concrete didn't stick. So there are all these galleries taking the water out, but still the environment has prevailed. And as we have tamed and done some opportunistic improvements, the maintenance roads have become bikeways, and there's been businesses that have started operating kayaks and people who go fishing and actually eat the fish, which is hard to believe. And of course, the bird life is rampant. And this is the poet, Lewis McAdams, who really started this incredible sort of movement. I met him around around the time that he started his work. He was from Texas, from Dallas, Texas, and had moved here and was teaching here. And there's Obama signing the river is navigable. One of the things that has really, the construct of One Water that was developed by the U.S. Water Alliance has really helped many of the engineers and landscape architects be able to really put forward this whole idea of conservation, recharging, reclaiming, and capturing, and that the water is one cycle and that we have to respect how to approach it as an integrated system. The mayor was a city councilman, actually was originally a student of Lewis McAdams. He was a councilman when we were working on the plan, and then it has become a stalwart sort of supporter of all these efforts, and is a chair of the C40 cities and also of LA's Green New Deal. And this is just a little joke, but no sooner did we think we understood our water budget, we had atmospheric rivers, which was part of the reason why the declaration that the river was, that we were over the drought, that things became crazy. And that was a really interesting phenomenon. So this is sort of the general lay of the land with all the watersheds and the complicated 7 congressional districts, 10 council districts, 20 neighborhood councils, and 12 community area plans, 5 watersheds, and 88 cities. That's kind of what you have to deal with when you're dealing with rivers and water. The first project we did was only half a river because 2 supervisors could not make a deal. So we started actually 3/4 of a river. It was really weird. I don't think it would happen now, but it happened, you know, when that was 13 years ago. There wasn't like that foresight of working together on these things. And the goals were, you know, in many ways pretty relevant to today. I think I would have emphasized some things more now, but resiliency and revitalization, which like brings to fore the issue, of course, of gentrification, which has become a big deal if you call it revitalize. Creating value was like, so how we authored these goals would have probably been different nowadays.
I think what was interesting from this process was 13 years ago, I don't think half the people in LA knew that we had a river.
Right.
And now everybody is like so gung-ho about this project and making a difference.
Yes, thank you, thank you. That's absolutely true. The beginning was basically the poet writing poetry and going to city council, and then having cleanups and having everybody go down to the cleanups and getting, you know, bicycles and beds and fire trucks or trucks out of the fire truck beds out of the river, and you know, really starting a movement. And so this one among the things we did in the 2007 plan is understand from the Army Corps of Engineers what our, you know, how far we could push the concrete and the embankment, and where we were creating value, both in terms of water quality and benefits for the community. And obviously flood protection was their main goal. So these are some of the ideas that we came forward with. These are the first photo montages that any of our firms had done, Bill Wang, Civitas, and ourselves. And it was really amusing because initially, for example, the trees up on the top, which we try to make look like sycamores, were like crazy pine trees, which, you know, don't exist along the river, along rivers here. And it was really funny looking back what it took to, and how excited our clients were to see these renderings. So, and then there were several studies that were subsequent studies that were looking at how do we deal with basically as tributaries come into the river, how do we start dealing with the land use and the change in land use and the change in morphology when those things happen. We continued over the years to do projects, sometimes in-house, sometimes with students, sometimes with colleagues. And in this one, we were looking at the many personalities, the edges are on the river. And what is it that we could do to start connecting the LA Zoo to Warner Brothers, or basically one of the reclamation plants to a really beautiful community across the way. And just really trying to sort of understand the layers of energy that we needed to deploy and to continue to inspire the city officials to think big about what the river could be and de-armor the river. We did models because we had just bought new equipment, and we had time over a 2-month period. So we did our own internal work. And then we started working with a grant from a conservancy from the state to look at one of Piggyback Yard, which is one of the main rail yards in the middle of the city. It's one of the owners is the owner of Southern Pacific, no, the railroad. Why can't I think of the Denver owner of the railroads? And he was thinking of building a stadium here, but it's Union Pacific, but it didn't go, it just didn't fly. You see Dodger Stadium up in the distance. So we were in any event funded with a group of consultants, including some really forward-thinking water engineers, to look at this 125-acre site and think, well, what could we do here? So this is a site where USC had already bought a lot of land, and instead of growing their campus 3 miles away, they started growing the medical campus here. And we started looking at how does this community grow and how does it engage the medical campus and both on residential labs and other buildings. We tested how much space did we need as we de-armored the river to actually allow the river to slow down. And also, what would we do in order to have it have the play fields and the parks that we were creating be floodable? So this is the kind of work we actually did, geomorphological studies, and we also had an economics, somebody who did economic studies about how much it was going to cost, you know, $500 million to buy the land. And so what would one have to do to have it sort of be able to be built, and sort of be restored with the development that was in play. So here you see what that would be. And it's across from Union Station. And there was a lot of work going on growing the station. So this is this work that we did. There were a couple of other firms, of course, involved, including Perkins and Will. And then as part of the work that we've been doing on the river between 6th and 7th, we're working on a project called Mesquite, which is with Bjork Engel's office, a project that sort of turns the case study house on stilts, and I mean, you know, and makes it get robust. And also a project where we actually, the client has a long-term lease over the rail to create parkland and to start restoring the edges of the river. This project has been in planning and in the city now for about 5 years. Everything takes 12 years, by the way, just so you get used to it. If you're gonna get into the morass of a city, that's what you get into. And so this is from that project to another project that was being considered, where everybody kept on saying, that can't be, you can't, how are you ever gonna get to the river with a train going by? And so we were challenged to actually think of a way that you could actually keep the train running. And I don't know why all these things are possible in all over the world in urban areas, but somehow in Los Angeles, they seem intractable. But everybody's, you know, everybody thinks this is gonna happen. Like, when am I gonna go on the kayak in the lower part of the river, not just the upper part of the river? The industrial arts and the arts district in Los Angeles, right where the river, you know, is adjacent, has really grown and matured. So it's pretty exciting. We're very much a part of that. This is a tiny little project, but an important project that we did for a gallery called Hauser Wirth, where we did bring the oak tree, the brother of the oak tree from our office. And this is basically parallel to the office on the other side of the city. So here we are. With roving collections and just a really interesting place. And more river plans, we got into tributaries. So it didn't, till about 3 years ago, it hadn't really occurred to me that tributaries had not been studied. And it occurred to an agency we work with all the time, and there had been some funding set aside at the state level to really bring parks, open space, and clean water and clean air to communities that have suffered over the years in environmental injustice. So our plan actually studied 100 miles, twice as many miles as the river is, of all these tributaries that are very interesting. And what's unique is that that it was unanimously adopted by Zoom in April, so you know. So we fortunately got through all the planning, but the final few weeks were on Zoom. We also used metrics in helping people understand the value of the plan, and the elected officials. They had never, although as part of the sustainability plan, Bureau Happold and us had really sort of put forward a series of sort of values and strategies for measuring success. This was the first plan that actually provided sort of the metrics. So our plan was going to provide 3 Griffith Parks, and Griffith Park is over 4,000 acres of land, second only to the park in Philadelphia. And then access to 1.5 million people to parks that they didn't have, and then et cetera. So it was very exciting. Our client was, and the county was sort of bursting out of their seams to see that there was a way of valuing success. And among the things, as they discovered that there were 2, we discovered by doing aerial photography like Doug Way taught us to do, which is, mine some property. So these are 2 empty, these are 2 mines that were basically no longer in use, that nobody knows how to sell or buy or do anything with. So we said, well, let's capture water and let's slow it down before it gets into the tributary and eventually the river. So they're in negotiations on this. And then we also, of course, always studied how do you deal with the edge of the river when there isn't a whole lot of land, and provide alternative methods of transportation with bikeways and bridges, and start enjoying the river and communing with the river. And also, we haven't had sort of bicycle places to actually fix your bikes or air your bike or buy water, and giving all those comforts. This is Taylor Yards, a 2020 project, 100 acres on the river, just to give you a sense of some things that are going on. And then on mile 12, that's starting from the bottom of the river going up in the Rio Hondo, we have a project with the Trust for Public Land, really, as the guidelines that were created, ways of thinking of how to span bridges, how to span freeways, and how to really make some of what seems intractable viable, and how to make it also have value for habitat, but also for people. And then finally, the Cleantech Corridor, which is what the area below us where we are in pink is called, is actually becoming a real destination. And this is just a mosaic of all the things that are going on the river. So even though we haven't built any big projects, there's lots going on and lots of little projects and a lot of imagination about the future. So parks and open space, we're going to do 4 parks. What is a park? A connection to nature, a place to community, a space to meet your neighbors. We have to think about parks differently. And so I'm going to show you one little park, which is one linear park, which is destination, I'm at 40 minutes, oh my. Destination Crenshaw, which is a project along the Crenshaw line, a very emotionally charged project. The African-American community really needing in their community more parks and more connectivity. And this is what the project is yielding, because we also are getting rail from downtown through Crenshaw and to the airport. So there's also some economic benefits. And an enormous amount of work for artists. So it's all moving forward. And this is just to show a sad moment, but Nipsey Tussle was part of our working group. And one of the first parks built in Los Angeles in 50 years, a leftover parcel from the school district. This is what the site looked like. This is overlooking downtown and in a neighborhood called Angelino Heights, and where we built a project that really was a window to the mountains and not sort of perhaps the most conventional thing, something that they questioned as part of the community work that we did, but they now love. And Silver Lake, one of our reimagined sort of infrastructure moments, one of 13 drinking water reservoirs that now is being open to the city and to access to the community. You can see here, Silver Lake is a very liberal sort of community and neighborhood. Small park next to City Hall, part of a competition. It was meant to spark both social cultural pulse of the city, to reveal change and to spark transformation. And here it is. It's one of the first parks in the city that's actually going to have a restaurant, 3 points of sale, including an experimental kitchen and a lot of oaks. So it worked out for us. And I'm going to just, go quickly now because I have 3 minutes. And this is the work that we did at the Nature Lab at dealing with urban ecology and at Natural History Museum, which is in the middle of LA County. It started out and people were so drawn to the place that there was, at the first years of the BioBlitz, 2 cities participated, and now 100 cities participate across the world. So here it is. It's very well loved, attended by students. We did a lot of performative pieces around the gardens. And finally is where we want to do and have a little conversation about 1520 Ovis project site. Ovis means ram in Latin. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kush to talk about this 300-acre project that we just finished.
Yeah, so it was an interesting history for us because we actually started working on the project back in 2006 when it used to be an old horse racetrack. And horse racetracks around the country have, turned into these really good opportunities for urban infill projects. And this specific one was also started as a mixed-use development with parks, open space, and residences. Fast forward a couple of years, we came to know that there was a stadium proposed down here, and really, added a 60-acre parcel and gave us the opportunity to really integrate the site into the neighborhood. There's some of the key elements that we had established during the old process that we wanted to bring into this new design. And one of that was the series of parks and open space, and how that really set up a framework for organizing different kinds of uses along the site, as well as connecting the neighborhood to the site itself.
So you see a 6-acre lake that basically is a model for Southern California of sort of accepting water and cleaning it and reusing it. Parks all around the perimeter and of this stadium, in this sense of openness, which is about the California tradition of indoor-outdoor living, which became really important. And a mayor who had accepted a specific plan, who just said, I'm gonna get everything I was promised. Mm-hmm. Next.
Yeah, so I think you kind of nailed it, Mia. I think one of the things that was very important to us, we understood that this new stadium was going to be this global destination, and we really wanted to make sure that it kind of emulated what Southern California really was about, and one of them being this indoor-outdoor experience, taking care of the blue sky that Mia had mentioned earlier, and then also the awesome weather we have. But one of the biggest challenges that we had with our site was we are 2 miles from LAX, which is the Los Angeles airport, and the site was directly between the 2 runway paths. So for having an NFL level football stadium, we couldn't have the height that we normally would have. And what that meant was we had to go down. We had to go down 100 feet into the ground in order to achieve this. And we took that as an opportunity to really make sure that the experience that we created kind of spoke to people going down, and then also like kind of relating back to the 2 more Southern California ecological or geological processes, which are the seismic, which there's a seismic activity that goes along the site, and then also the wave energy. And so what you can start seeing is, layers of like experiences that are being created, not from the field level, including the canyons that are on the left of this picture, which was kind of our way to get plants, lights, and air down into the field level as you went down, and really create this one of a kind of unique experience. We talked a little bit about the lake, but as a part of this privately funded stadium, which is the first of its kind, we are also providing 25 acres of open space to the city of Inglewood, which is historically very part poor. So it's kind of it was a really good lesson on public and private partnerships. And then the lake itself is it's actually the first of its kind in Southern California, which it captures and retains stormwater from about 75% of the site by directly directing water into the lake or through an arroyo, which filters and gets water there.
We took advantage of the notion of the Mediterranean biome. California plant material selection in this area, given the heat and everything else, was a little sort of reduced. And then we started thinking, let's think globally, and we've actually deployed this strategy other places, that we could have plants from around the Mediterranean biome, given the water, sort of longitude, latitude relationship to, and also a relationship to the ocean. And it opened up a sort of a much larger sort of set of opportunities.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why the Mediterranean biome is so great is because the diversity we have, right? Like you talked about your section going through California, but what we have to understand is with that section comes a huge diversity of landscapes. So you have the deserts that has the palm trees and the cactus to the mountains that have the conifers and over trees.
Yes. So we, you know, we created a botanical garden of many sorts. I mean, we didn't pitch it that way at all. It was because otherwise we were afraid we'd be shut down. We just said, you know, everybody understood we wanted an indoor, an outdoor really strong relationship, and that we needed to get air flowing, and that we wanted some shade. And now we actually have signs that are like signs from a botanical garden, and everybody's very excited about it.
And I think what else that we were able to achieve through that was like having these different plant types along different sides of the stadium. You kind of start giving the stadium more unique personalities. So as people are going out, it also kind of creates a secondary level of wayfinding. And you can see how like the different trees kind of like are along different sides of the stadium here. And then this image is actually a really great one. It's taken from one of the plane landing at LAX, but it really starts to give you a sense of scale and this idea of a city within a city. 300 acres in a metropolitan area like Los Angeles is pretty rare.
And when I mentioned the mayor sort of keeping us, keeping everybody, especially the developer or the owner, is like, my constituents are going to get access. And so let's talk about what that means. And what that means is really amazing. I mean, all this area is available for, you know, basically the stadium will be used about 50, 60 days of the year. And the rest of the time, otherwise, you know, of course you can't go hang out inside the wall, you know, sort of the certain areas, but you can be in the, you know, 60 or so acres of publicly available space. So I mean, I think we're over time, right?
Yeah, you're about 15 minutes.
So if you want to open questions, I had a couple more projects, but I think we could, you know, that sort of in a nutshell talks about the experiences that we've had in the last, you know, in that experience, which culminates with this project, which I think as people have started writing about it, it's a real democratic space. And if you see like the park regulations when you first enter to the area by the lake, it's very heartening. We weren't that involved in the exact regulations, but it says, you know, it's yours for, you know, from sunset to sundown. You can't drink or smoke, and you can't bring your dog, but otherwise it's your park.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Mia?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Amazing range of work and unified by some pretty clear values and passion. I have a question here that I really like. And you alluded to it earlier when you talked about Rayner Banham and architects in the 70s, 60s, 70s, writing about how fascinating LA was as an expansive and concrete place. One of the viewers asked, where's the biggest gap between people's perception of LA versus locals' real experience? You could probably apply that to New York City too.
Yeah. I would say that one of the real gaps is public transportation, which both in terms of the network of bicycles and the network of both above grade and below grade public transportation, it's grown tremendously, and by the time the Olympics hit, you know, but even before, you'll be able to go from LAX and not necessarily rent a car. And for those of us who live not far from some of those stations, we'll just be able to get on a plane, on a train.
Yeah. But also, I think to that map that you had shared about how it's a not as dense of a city, but it's very widely spread. I think there's pockets around the city, and I think people are normally just accustomed to being in their little pockets and not knowing the bigger picture. Even like for the LA River,
right?
I don't think until we did the master plan that people even realized that there was the river here. So I think there's definitely like a growing sense about people understanding the city a little bit more, but there's the gap because of the scale and how separated everything is.
So I think that the millennials have been amazing because they explore places and spaces, you know, without much without fear. So it would not, you know, in the past, it would have been unusual to find people down in the river, you know, reading poetry. Well, now you could see that happening, you know, and I think to Kush's point, which is one of that images that I showed, which is the map of the neighborhoods. You know, it's not, you know, so for those of us, let's say, who live in Hollywood, you know, you live in part of Hollywood and maybe your part of Hollywood is also part of Melrose. And you create your own little village and, you know, so it's a very sort of, it's rich in that way. We've had a series of really interesting sort of, for example, we have Ciclavia, an organization that closes streets off and has these sort of almost urban tourism sort of 2-day programs. So you can go on Wilshire Boulevard from downtown all the way to the beach, which you know, you can do in 2 hours on a bike, but not when everybody else is crossing and doing. So it's you know, there is something about it that is very alluring as a city, just because it's so expansive and there's so many different kinds of places to experience.
And ask, following up on that, and more specifically, is there a greater Los Angeles master plan, a multidisciplinary plan thing that could try to address issues with walkability? So is anybody tackling it from, I'm guessing somebody's tackling it from a macro multimodal perspective?
Yeah, isn't that what Metro does?
Metro,
yeah. We have a pretty, you know, we have the leader of our Metro, Phil Washington, used to be in Denver. You know, with COVID, it's all very complicated. You know, people are afraid to get on some of those trains. So, but yes, there is major efforts to connect the city and walkability. Like we have the head of the Department of Transportation is very focused on, you know, how to operate anything from the lighting to the crosswalks to closing streets. You know, there's a sort of an appetite for making it more bikeable and more walkable.
And especially in the last couple of years now, knowing that Los Angeles is going to be hosting the Olympics in a few years, I think there's a specific deadline that the city has set for themselves. So there's some real movement right now, recently, in updating public transportation. There's a whole push for bike lanes and connecting bike lanes from regional perspective as well. That has happened in the last couple of years, and you can really start seeing the change in places like downtown, where we have some of the best bike lanes now.
And I would say that the river and the tributaries actually offer new real estate to the transportation agencies they didn't realize they had. Because you have these widened maintenance roads that really are accessible directly from, you know, cul-de-sacs and other communities. And now you can start bridging, let's say, to the school across the way that used to take you a half hour to get to. Now it'll take you 15 minutes to get to. So there's, you know, I think there's a very creative spirit around transportation. Easier to implement in some ways, probably more expensive, but easier to implement than housing.
There's an interesting sort of different stream of questions, and I'll try to put them together. Mia, you might want to step out for a minute so Kush can answer these.
Okay.
No.
How do boys do the girls? Okay.
Kush, how did you get the job? And let's see. Let me get back to this. How did you get the job? What were your strengths, and what would you advise? The firm looks very exciting. The works looks amazing. It looks like fantastic place to work. So tell us about working there and tell us how you got the job.
Well, it was interesting. I actually got the job from a cold call back when you know, we were going through our first kind of economic recession, and it was just something I was always admired what this office was about at the time, and was really interested in the project. And I kind of just decided to go have an interview with Mia, and we just like had a really good conversation, and thought it was a good fit. And that was 12 years ago, and I'm still here. And I just have to say that some of the things that I had, like, I kind of knew the passion that people in this studio bring to work every day. It's just something that you know, you want to like be here, come here, and like it kind of gets you going at a lot of times. So that was my story.
Do you help interview new prospects? Are you involved personally in that?
Yes, I am sometimes, yes.
Okay. And so what impresses you when somebody comes in? Portfolio, personality? Are people asked to work with you for a couple hours to see what their skill sets are? Tell us a little bit. And Mia, you can certainly chime in on this. I was joking.
I think for us, you know, we definitely look at the portfolio. We want to make sure that it's something we're, you know, like is a good fit. I think personality definitely takes a lot of precedence for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're always looking for energetic, passionate people like ourselves. You know, it's kind of like an ethos for this office. So I think personality is a little bit more even, right? Because you can learn stuff, and we encourage people, and we have a lot of mentors in this office that encourage young people and teach them.
I would say, you know, say that having some skills is important. Yeah. Like, so you come and you know that you can operate independently for a few hours. So you can, you know, that becomes important. But I would say that because as we've gone into this whole era of sort of equity and inclusion and other things like that, that are so important. And of course, our mission statement and values certainly speak to that. But one of the things is that we want to make sure that when people arrive, that we can mentor them, that they have the skills, but that they care, like he was saying, about the same things that we care about. So everybody started asking us what we were going to do, and I said, well, what are you doing? And you know, the fact was that unless we do volunteer work together or work at a church or a school or something, so traditionally for like 20 years we were doing a good amount of pro bono work, meaning pro bono work, we pay you your salary, you don't even know whether it's paid work or not. It's become more difficult. We will do some charrettes with people, but it's not like we can engage fully in a project, you know, in many of those projects anymore. So I just think an attitude about making things happen. I always, when I go around the stadium now and I look at what Kush and the team got done, and I just, for me, it's very clear that it's like, first of all, knowing how to work with the construction trade, and sort of inspiring them to do their best. And when you critique their work or you make them redo it, that they understand why. And my piece of the work, which I think I made sort of Kush really understand, was that we have to over design. Like you design beyond what you think you might get built, like, you know, extra details or extra material, the materials much more interesting and well resolved. And then you have to get used to the idea that there's going to be value engineering, and in the end you become creative about that, and then you realize, because one of the clients that referred us to this job, that's the thing we told her today. It's like, well, but didn't you have some value engineering? I said, yes, but that doesn't look value engineering. Yeah, because it had that many more bells and whistles and it doesn't show. So anyway, defensive design is what I call it.
This is a question I've got. Question comes up because some of us are getting on in our careers and we hand drew stuff and we're good at it. And it was a way that we shared the experience of drawing from the hand to the heart, kind of. And other architects and other people that we worked with, engineers, love to draw. And so how much in the idea development is tracing paper and working together and generating ideas really quickly, hand drawn? We get a lot of questions from students about, am I learning, skills that are never going to be employed and diminishing, dinosauric?
To me, I think it's, I think it's a personal choice. I think for us, like I'll include myself in this group, is I think hand drawing is a process of how we get to a solution. And we've seen like a lot of the younger people, is that okay for me to say? Yeah. Is, their process is different. So they work through the computer, whatever the medium is at the end of the day. I think it's about the process and how you get to the end point.
So I'm not in complete agreement. I think that hand drawing is faster. Somehow, even if you are born attached to a computer, hand drawing to get a feeling of something you're doing is just faster. And I find myself periodically, sort of doing that with some, with some designers, and I think they get it. Right? I mean, it can't go very far, but in the visual conceptual, recently, I also, there were the edges of a fountain that was very complex, and, it was even in it was hard to get it in the 3D drawing. So I just went to get some clay, and like in an hour we had a concept. So some of these, even though we have 3D printers and we have all the, other technology, sometimes it's just faster. The things we used to do at Pete's office when we wanted to get a sense of scale, which I've imparted to Kush and everybody else, is put the, tape up on the wall, make sure that it's the right height, the right width. And then of course now they do foam samples. I mean, we have to throw away a bunch of, samples, but, it's about the process of learning about scale. Mm-hmm. What is 20 feet? What's 50? What's 200 feet? Like, what is it,
I'm curious to ask Todd, though, like how it works in an academic setting, and like what students are using. Are they still drawing by hand, or are they just on the computer?
Some of us are hammering that drawing is really a quick way to generate ideas, to put it on the wall, to put a whole wall of a story together. That would be sort of my thought, and that stories tell a design, that story making is part of the design process. And so whether it's coming out of the computer or coming out of the hand, it needs to go on the wall, and everybody on the team needs to be able to tell the story, and that's alignment. And so I think I agree with Kush that I think all forms are valid. Mm-hmm. I think people can distinguish themselves today by drawing better. Both in terms of rapid fire ideation or idea generation, and also it's becoming a little bit more rare. Mm-hmm. Employers want to know how you develop your ideas. They want to see the sequence of development. They don't want to see that you're just good at, Lumion or something that makes something glorious at the end that doesn't have any scale sensitivity to it.
So I want to for a minute go back to being in school with two very different types of sort of pedagogic, proposals, the Carl Steinitz and the Peter Walker, just how that was kind of strange. You wanted to make everybody happy, and you felt a little strange. But I will say that, and one of the things that happened like years later, because I'm good friends with Pete, is that he always comes to the lectures that I do. He said, I don't know where you came from. I just don't understand it. So what, I mean, I don't understand it, but I appreciate it. Like he like sits there and you see him smile. So I'm sure Todd is doing a similar, similarly, very, sort of helping you guys find your voice. And I just think it's, as you move forward, getting, using skills and really trying to do something that's satisfying and we don't only need designers in the world that become famous and get on the covers of magazines. We need designers that can write well. We need designers that are our clients. I encourage people to go in and work at the city or the county or the metropolitan agencies, and just like there's so much they can accomplish with us, right? When you think, it's like it becomes such an incredible opportunity, and I think that, I don't know how, Todd, throw it back at you, but if that's something like, I noticed there's one of the speakers is someone like that, right? Who works in the public sector, and I think that that's important.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty good balance of interest because Utah and the Intermountain West, Kush has now witnessed it himself. Extraordinarily beautiful, and it's extraordinarily agency controlled, right? So there are a lot of job positions here dealing with hundreds of thousands of acres of landscape that are scenic and multi-purpose, agency driven. So we have quite a balance out here.
That's wonderful.
One last question, we'll wrap it up and let you guys get on with your weekend. I think people are extraordinarily impressed with your viewpoint, your passion, and they want to know what picture you would paint. Maybe this is not a completely clear question. What picture you would paint of Los Angeles 20 years from now?
I think it'll be denser. I mean, we're starting to find, areas with denser development, mixed use. I think, so, and it'll be interesting to see, like, is it in corridors? For example, on Alameda, there's this sort of plan to actually build like Wilshire Boulevard, which is only like a 2-block wide, but miles long corridor. And it ebbs and, it's not the same height or the same density the whole way, but there is an opening in the way it's thought of, where as it goes also starts downtown, goes through Koreatown. We're building a tower in Koreatown with a developer that's doing 50 stories. It's going to be the first 50-story tower, but then you keep on going. You have the county museum, and as you jump over towards Santa Monica, you have more high rises. So there'll be that, I think. There'll be more of that.
I think there'll be a lot more, hopefully, public transportation.
Right.
I'm hoping for a lot more green and blue infrastructure projects to happen, hopefully, in the next 20 years.
So the question is, what lands get recycled? You abandon some streets to make them more pedestrian. You look at campuses like USC and UCLA, who have thought leaders in this arena, but are really behind the time. They waited till the Wilshire stop, till there was a metro stop on Wilshire to start thinking about their campus. And, kids at UCLA actually take Uber from one side of the campus to the other because there's it's not very good connectivity within the campus, and that's a telling story. So I think that there's going to be more of that, where there'll be parts of the city that are, where cars. I mean, there is an effort to obviously go electric the whole way, but there's also by 2035. But also, I think there's an effort to, like, for example, change zoning. I'm on the advisory committee for zoning, and we're still at a car and a half per unit. And we're trying to kill that, you know, like, no, maybe there's shared cars in these facilities. So less automobiles, beautiful river and creek, like linear parks everywhere. And I don't know where people like Arnold are going to, be filmed, but they'll be filmed somewhere. And
more focus on the public realm.
And more focus on the public realm.
Yeah.
I think more people living outside. I've seen presentations finally on a couple of our projects where the ground level is on pilotis and is giving over to public, like in Brasilia, like it should have been for a long time, and more willingness on the part of developers to say, okay, we'll set it back 20 feet, or we'll do things like that. It's complicated. There's still an east and a west side, and parity, making sure that there's equity from an environmental and social and economic perspective is so important. And managing growth, there needs to be a boundary, more defined boundary.
Antithetical. So I'm just going to say some things and let Danielle wrap this up. A couple things. I was once talking to Pete Walker, ran into him at the exposition at the national conference where he always used to walk around with his little bag of products and stuff. And we got to talking about things, and he said, one of the laments of a practitioner that works in a lot of different places is that you never get to see the benefits of your ideas in your own backyard. And I think the really impressive thing about what you've done that's so laudable is that you've spent a lot of time in your own backyard fixing the place up and helping to raise the consciousness of people in LA. And you're truly indigenous in that regard. And I think it's just it's really great. And it has been fantastic to hear your work and to be able to spend an hour with you again, or over an hour. And Kush, thank you very much for your additions. The work's impressive, and we're very grateful that you graced us with your presence. Danielle?
Thank you, Mia and Kush. Again, what a fascinating talk. And I love this last question of what do you see the future of LA looking like? In a studio we have with Todd, we're discussing alternate futures and using different tools like geodesign and other frameworks to envision a regional landscape. And we had Professor Daniela Hirschfeld today in our urban design studio talking about waterscapes and blue infrastructure. And there's so many fascinating aspects to LA and how it merges with these concepts. And it'll be interesting to look into the future potentially with you guys and see how LA evolves. I also just want to thank Todd. You are truly out of this world today. So thank you for that. And to also remind everyone that we have Shannon Ellsworth, who's an alumni of Utah State, who will be speaking about public lands on October 9th. So thank you again, Mia and Kush. We look forward to connecting with you in the future, and thank you to everyone listening today. Have a great night.
Please visit us. Come to LA and see it for yourselves. It would be fun. Knock on the door.
I think people are going to line up for job prospects.
Oh, well, that's good too. That's good too. Anyway, congratulations on all these experiences that the students are getting and that you're all organizing. It sounds wonderful. And have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. You as well.